The CIMA OCS pre-scene for May-August 2026 is out. And if you're sitting this exam, this video is exactly where you need to start. We're talking about SOPA Restaurant Group. 9 restaurants, Latin American street food, a husband and wife founding team, and 41.7 million Zealand dollars in revenue. It sounds like a great story, and it is. But this pre-scene is packed with exam triggers. And in this video, we're going to show you 5 of them. Just few. We'll kick off with Nisha, who is our OCS expert tutor, who will walk you through the SOPA company group and the background. Who they are, how they operate, and what are the numbers and what do they tell you. Then we'll cover your role as a finance officer and the core competencies you'll be tested on, based on the 2026 CIMA guidelines. After that, a clear breakdown of how the OCS exam is actually structured. And we finish with 5 key triggers you cannot afford to ignore. Limited factor analysis, shadow prices, time series forecasting, IFRS 16, IAS 2 inventories, and the CIMA Code of Ethics. 50 plus minutes of free content. Grab a coffee, get your notes ready, and let's go!
Welcome to the CIMA Operational Case Study pre-scene analysis for your May and August 2026 examination sessions. So this is basically a detailed analysis of your pre-scene for the SOPA restaurant chain. So the industry is basically Latin American cuisine, and the hypothetical restaurant chain is located in the hypothetical fictional country, Zealand. Now, in terms of scale, the restaurant chain has 9 restaurants. Now, this is something to note, that the company has 9 restaurants, but what's also important is the fact that the company is growing, and the company, as you will see through our discussion, is expanding. So that's something I want you to look for as we dive deeper into our discussion. So your role, you're a finance officer. So you are at the operational role level of the company, and you likely report to Jack Griggs, rarely Raj Patel, but very unlikely, but mostly Jack Griggs. So we are also going to cover the exam triggers. So the F1, P1, E1, F1 triggers. Now, if you did your OTQ exams, you will be familiar with these. So these are the relevant subjects for the operational level. So in this document, we're going to cover specifically 18 exam triggers. They are wide range triggers. So even though they're 18, they actually explain many more wider areas you need to focus on. In addition, to give you more practice, to give you more understanding, we'll have the part 2 of this discussion, where we will be expanding the pre-scene further and discussing exclusively other triggers for P1, F1 and E1. So that will be also a part of your pre-scene analysis package. So you can see we have color-coded these exam triggers. So F1 is mainly color-coded in green, P1 in blue, E1 in purple. Now, something you need to bear in mind is that sometimes if there can be relevant examination triggers that go between these subjects or is a combination of these subjects. So sometimes they might, for simplicity purposes, then be color-coded in just one of these colors. So don't worry too much about this, but basically these are the color codes you need to look for. So setting a little bit of context into your pre-scene. So your pre-scene is of course not trying to reference any real world events. You would know that there is many things happening in the world, different geopolitical conflicts, pandemics, post-pandemic period basically. So You don't have to include this in your answer. Ideally, I would recommend focus entirely on the information in the pre-scene. You don't have to really focus on what's really happening in the real world in terms of this situation. However, you can focus on relevant industrial trends, industrial aspects that is relevant currently, but that is actually very different to actually real world events. Now, the reason for this is because you want to keep your answers simple. You don't want to overcomplicate it because the pre-scene is prepared basically based on a simple environment of the economy and not assuming all these wider geopolitical aspects. Now, you operate or you are in Zealand, and that's where SOPA is based in. It's a fictitious European country, like I mentioned. So remember key aspects. It's in Zealand, so the currency is the Z dollar. So you have to refer to, when you're talking about currency, you're stating something, you would mention, for an example, Z dollar 200. You don't just say $200. Instead, you would say Z dollar 200. Then when you're referring to the country, you would say we are in Zealand. Refer to the European aspect, the European aspects of operations. What's your role within this company? So if you look at this, your role is a finance officer. So you work within the finance department. So you are responsible to prepare financial information, management accounting related information to assist the finance manager, or in this instance, the head of finance, Jack Greggs. Now, you're not at any point a senior manager. So your answers do not and ideally should not be strategic in nature. Now, why I mention this is if you continue to do CIMA, as you move through the management level and also the strategic level, you will notice that your answers need to change. Your answers will change. But at this level, your answers should just focus on operational aspects. You basically will interpret data given to you. You will explain data. You will evaluate data. You will flag technical issues as a finance officer. So as a finance officer, you will use your knowledge of F1, P1, E1 within your answers. So that's something to bear in mind. So this is just a bit of context. Now let's jump into the company and the real meat of the pre-scene. So first, what is the background of this company? So the company background is the two founders are Paulo and Sofia Perez. So they have a Latin American origin. They were born and raised in Latin America. And then they arrived in this European country, Zealand. Sofia was 21, Paulo was 23. Basically, they are immigrants, Latin American immigrants. And both of them have exposure, or I would say wide experience in the Latin cuisine. First of all, it's basically their native food. Second is, Paulo was a chef. He was trained in Latin America to make their dishes. And further, when he moved to Zealand, he worked in some of Zealand's best restaurants. So definitely he fine-tuned his skills. So it definitely puts him in a position to be able to handle a restaurant business. So he is definitely having the required skills. So that is a plus. Then Safia was a server. So she worked in the restaurant industry. She worked herself up to the front of house manager. So you can see she's not like Paulo, but she did work in the restaurant industry from a server level to even up to the manager level. So she has a good experience when it comes to restaurant operations, I would say. So she would be good at restaurant operations, while Paulo would be good at the food aspect of it in terms of the quality and the aspect of delivery of menu items. So this is basically their areas of expertise as well. So their current role within this company is Paulo is the managing director and the executive chef. Now, you need to ask yourself, do they fit the roles they are currently in? Then if you look at Sophia, she's a restaurant operations director. So again, do they fit the roles they are currently in? And I would say yes. If you look at their initial roles, their areas of expertise, you would definitely see a clear fit in the roles they're currently in. So if you look at the timeline of the company was basically formed in 2016. The company was founded. The first restaurant was opened in Tombo. So that's the capital of Zealand. And then you can see 2 years later, they opened their second restaurant again in the capital of the country. So they would have been doing good, obviously. Then the third restaurant took some time, it seems. Or basically, it's not saying the third restaurant, but 4 more restaurants opened in Tombo, making it totally 6 restaurants in the capital. Expansion beyond Tombo begins, 3 restaurants in other major Zealand cities. So it doesn't give you the timeline. Could be in 2023 that these were open, or it could be in between 2018 and 2023, which is most likely. So 5 years, you can see they have grown quite a bit. Now, remember, we are assuming that we're not assuming a pandemic. So that's why you could see that if you think of a pandemic situation, maybe this is highly unrealistic. But given that we're assuming normal conditions, basically they naturally grew. Now we come to financial year 2025. So if you look at financial year 2025, in total, they have now 9 restaurants. They are a 41.7 million Z dollar business. They have over 300 employees. Key things to remember. What's their revenue? How many restaurants do they have as of date? And how many employees? Now here is the interesting thing. In a few months, so you're going to do your exam in May, or you will do it in August. So you have to understand that the company is now in between. This is a clear exam trigger point. Basically, you're talking about a time where they're working on the opening of the 10th restaurant. So they are going to be busy with this. They're going to open in a New Zealand region. So not in a region they're already operating, in a new area. So that is something that will be taught, I would say, in your exam. And then, of course, in the future, which could be the next year, could be the following year, they're planning on foreign expansion. So international expansion is also a part of their strategy, their plan. Now, going back to the biographical information about the two, both of them, so they are married to each other. They met in 2006, married in 2012. So they are family basically, and they opened because of their passion for Latin American food, cuisine. They brought these flavors to Zealand, and then they opened this restaurant named SOPA, which is of course a combination of their names. Now this is not a very big piece of information that might be relevant to you, but why does it become relevant? It gives you a personal touch. It gives you a personal touch, and you can understand this business is very close to them. I want you to dive in further to understand that this business probably relates to their roots, Latin America. It relates to their childhood memories. It relates to their favorite food, the flavors they love. It definitely would remind them about the country they are from in Latin America, the flavors. It probably they relate it to a sense of nostalgia. So why are these all important? These are all important because you will understand the passion in which Paolo and Sophia run this business. You can see that they have been totally committed to the business, to have basically within 9 to 10 years, having 9 restaurants, planning their 10th restaurant within the 10th year. But of course, this does bring questions as to, which we'll see later on in our discussion, especially when we go to the industry aspect. This does bring questions as to whether they're expanding too fast, service quality, consistency. What are they doing to ensure that consistency is maintained? But that's for later. But this is just a basic company background. So, also to remember is that the company is 100% owned by the two, so there is no external shareholders, no listed shares. These can be slight trigger points on the day of the exam for the growth to maybe list the company, maybe have other shareholders involved, because now the company is growing. So when it grows beyond a particular level, it doesn't make sense, or it becomes impractical to just keep it between the two owners, isn't it? So therefore, we might see practical growth movement. The number of employees, their head office is based in the capital city of Tombo in Zealand, and all their restaurants follow uniformity. So all restaurants have the same menu, same decor, common brand. So it's like a bit like a franchise model. So that makes us question, could a franchise model work in the future as the company expands? Because as we go through this pre-scene, you will see clear evidence of basically how it might be difficult to manage the company as it grows, and therefore maybe what could we do? So now let's focus on the industry. So the restaurant industry within Zealand itself. So if you look at the key market statistics given in your pre-scene, the market size is 45 billion Z dollars. We saw our revenue as of December 2025. It was 41.7 Z dollars. So that shows our market share. Our market share is not even 1%. Not even. It's 0.09%. So very small. So it reflects also that it probably is a very fragmented market. And therefore also you might see that because of the fragmented nature of the market, we have a very small share. But of course, also another practical reason why our market share is small is because we are offering Latin American cuisine, which is a small pocket, I would say even a niche pocket of the total restaurant market, right? So that is also something to consider. The industry structure is you get many multi-restaurant operators, which is like ourselves, but you also get some single restaurant operators. Growth has been 3% per annum over the last 3 years. So the industry is not growing really fast, but the industry is not decreasing either. But of course, from 2026, the growth is going to improve. So question is, why is the growth improving? Maybe because of urbanization, people are demanding more for restaurant-based meals. People are preparing less meals at home. So for all of those reasons, the growth is expected to rise in the future from 2026. However, your pre-scene mentions a very specific type of risk I want you to remember and bear in mind. High corporate failure risk. Now, this industry we operate in, if you have some context to economics, which you don't have to have, just to give you something interesting, is that we operate in a monopolistic competition, as it was. A monopolistic market. That means we have a lot of different market players, as we just discussed. A lot of new restaurants. This is what's applicable to you. A lot of restaurants come in. Some succeed, some don't. So that's why corporate failure becomes very high. So the reasons for corporate failure, which is of course even trigger given to you in your pre-scene, is one is poor customer reviews on food and service. Now your pre-scene, for very good reason, gives you an entire section which focuses on recent reviews. So if you look at recent reviews, you would see, just to give you a snapshot, our reviews were mixed. We had some giving very good reviews, some reviews were very bad, and some of the bad reviews were pretty consistent across the bad reviews. If the quality of the food wasn't good, many mentioned that. Or the food was cold, Many mention that. So it seems like it is a consistent problem. So poor customer reviews is one reason why restaurants fail. Next, expanding too fast. Opening new restaurants at a very high pace. Now, if you look at us, just from 2016 to 2025, opened a total of 8 other restaurants. So, apart from the main restaurant, 8 other main restaurants. The question is, that is pretty high of a growth, because if you look at it, basically every year we have opened a new restaurant. Every year. And we are planning one even in July 2026. So, opening a restaurant every year, the question is, do we have the adequate management team? Because right now we see that Sophia looks after the management, the operations. So inadequate management, definitely something we need to be concerned. Then too much of diversity in food and dining experience or confused branding. Now we talk about having a consistent brand. All, if you go back at that previous section, we said we have the same menu, the same decor, the same brand. So this doesn't seem a huge problem for us. However, making sure that the new restaurants we set up maintain this brand is something to consider, but not a big issue. But I think the first 2 points are very applicable to us. Very applicable. They are actually, I would say, wake up calls for us, because we are having negative reviews. We are expanding a bit too fast, in my perspective. So, something to keep in mind. And this can be a direct exam link for you about our current expansion strategy. Because service inconsistency seems relevant to us, we are expanding at a very high pace. In addition, what are the challenges the industry is facing? Number one, economic factors. We can see that consumers, they may lose confidence due to basically adverse economy, an economy where prices are rising. Basically, inflation will be the number one reason why customers might basically stop eating from out. They might eat more at home, or maybe because they are not happy with what we offer. But if you look at our pre-scene, we are being told that about 70% of our customers return back to us. So that signifies a loyal customer base, which is good for us. But it seems like new customer acquisition is hard, and that might be a potential issue. Then if you look at cost pressures, inflation in raw material prices. So we try to, as much as possible, have fresh ingredients. So cost pressures are definitely something to be concerned about. And of course, that is, I'm sure, an issue we will continue to face. So the pre-scene again gives solutions for it, which we are working towards. Various aspects such as vertical farming. Vertical farming, we don't do it currently, but maybe that's an option. Vertical farming might be an option. Diversifying might be an option. And of course, high staff turnover. So it's difficult to recruit. It's difficult to keep the staff you recruited, because at the end of the day, most people do not want to continue living their life as a server, as a being a waiter or something like that. So it tends to be young people attracted for this job, and it tends to be a more of a transition position. So therefore, having staff retaining can be hard. So what Paula and Sophia do is they try to have fair wages, so that encourages people to stay, encourages employee morale across the 9 restaurants. But in turn, this will affect cost of labor. But what opportunities within the industry? So the opportunities, of course, are also great within the industry. We are in the advent of AI. Use AI is the key aspect when it comes to technology. Use AI, use automation, use robotics within the restaurant business. So what can that do for us? For an example, when it comes to having a ghost kitchen. So maybe food deliveries, and we want to have a ghost kitchen, we can do a feasibility study using AI demand forecasting. In addition, we can sometimes use robotics to prepare certain dishes because robotics can really use precision when it comes to maintaining recipe accuracy given by the basically given by Paulo. So use and embrace technology. Next, focus on guest experience. So one of the key aspects you need to identify with this pre-scene is we are offering a service. So whenever you are offering a service, make people feel good. Make people feel good. If they feel good, they'll return. So if you know the 4 P's of marketing, it's not just the 4 P's, but you now need to focus on the 3 additional P's. So make them feel good, have a nice restaurant, appealing restaurant. Make sure that the people who are serving the guests are pleasant, kind, give them a good experience, cater to their needs. Next, dynamic pricing is a key trend, a key aspect, opportunity to make use of. So during peak times, prices are higher. During off-peak times, to encourage demand, to encourage people to come in, could we offer a lower price? So for an example, could we have a set menu during lunch times where we have weekday lunch times where we have less demand? A set menu at a cheaper cost or cheaper rate, I would say. So that will encourage people to come. And that will also help us to continue moving forward. Invest in people. So I think that's something we are doing. Continue to make people feel good. Employees within the company to improve their skills so that they will give a good offering to the guest. Because remember, we spoke about how guest experience is very important. Finally, diversify. So takeaways, home deliveries. So these are things that we are not currently doing. Then, of course, we are trying to venture into branded dips. Diversify both into related. First should be related. Next should be unrelated areas as well. But of course, unrelated areas should be only after exploring the related areas and only after a good feasibility study. So basically in this video, I wanted to cover the basic aspects of SOPA. I wanted to cover the background of the company for you to understand your role and for you to understand the industry dynamics, the industry now. So the key takeaways from this video I want you to focus on is this company is managed passionately by its owners, exclusive owners, Paulo and Sofia. They have a passion towards the business. They have opened 9 restaurants in 9 to 10 years. Fast growth, big question mark. They are going to open more restaurants in the future. In fact, one in July 2026. The restaurant industry seems a little bit shaky in terms of growth and a little bit shaky in terms of some of the challenges it's facing. It seems like giving customers a good experience, managing growth is vital. So these are things you should have fixed in your mind as we move forward.
All right, let's talk about the CIMA Operational Case Study. We're going to break down exactly how to master the role you're meant to play in this exam. But first, I want you to change how you think about this. What if this wasn't really a test at all? What if it was a simulation? Because honestly, that's exactly what the CIMA OCS is. It's designed to drop you right into the shoes of a finance professional working in a real company. So here's our game plan. We'll look at what this whole simulation concept means, what your specific role is, what your mission is, and of course, how you're actually graded. Then we'll connect it all back to how this sets you up for the real world. Okay, let's dive in. Seriously, forget everything you know about traditional exams. This isn't about memorizing and repeating theory. Think of the OCS as your first day at a new job. You're dropped into a company and you're immediately tasked with helping to solve real-world problems. And look, this is straight from the source. The entire philosophy behind the case study is to mirror the challenges and situations you're actually going to face in your career. It's a test of your performance in a setting that's as close to reality as it gets. So if this is a simulation, who are you? Let's get to know your character. For the OCS, you are stepping into the role of an entry-level finance professional, or as we'll call it, a finance officer. This diagram here, it's basically your world map. You're right there in the middle. You'll be working with your finance colleagues, but also with leaders from across the business. And you'll be using all those key skills, from analysis to communication, to get the job done. So what does that mean officially? Well, you're part of the finance team, and your main job is to focus on the short-term stuff, helping to plan, coordinate, and control the day-to-day operations of the business. So your to-do list is pretty packed. You're helping with working capital, you're prepping reports, but I want you to notice the verbs here. Support, provide insights, interact. This is the key. You're not just a number cruncher hiding in a corner. You're expected to be a proactive business partner. All right, you know your role. Now, what's your mission? The exam is built around 6 core activities. These are the critical everyday tasks that a real finance officer has to be great at. This is what you're there to do. And here they are, your 6 key missions. Everything from costing and budgeting to performance analysis and supporting decisions. But the most important part of this table, that column on the right, the weightings. This tells you where you have to shine. And if we pull out the big ones, you see a very clear picture. Budgeting, performance analysis, and supporting short-term decisions. These 3 areas are the heavyweights. They can make up a whopping 75% of your total score. This is the absolute heart of your role. Okay, so you know the role, you know the mission. But what's the secret to actually succeeding? Let's peel back the curtain on how you're assessed, because it's not just about what you know, it's about how you use it. Think about it like this. The objective tests, they were about checking if you had all the right tools in your toolbox. The case study exam, this is where you prove you can actually build something with those tools, that you can apply your knowledge and influence decisions to create real value. And the way you do that is by showing off these power skills. It's not enough to just look at the data. You have to question it, analyze it, use it to solve a problem. And, this is crucial, communicate what you found. These are the skills that make you valuable to an employer. So how do you put it all together? Well, this model is your secret weapon. The 4I approach is your roadmap from just having numbers on a page to making a real, tangible business impact. You always start with information, the raw data. Then, by analyzing it and connecting the dots, you create insight. You use that insight to influence people with clear recommendations. And that finally leads to a positive impact on the business. This journey is what you need to show in every single task. So let's bring it all home. Why are we so focused on this idea of a simulation? Because this is so much more than just an exam. It is a direct bridge to your future career. The whole reason the OCS is designed this way is to make sure that when you pass, you can hit the ground running. It proves to employers that you can be productive from day one because you've already been practicing the job. So, as you study, I want you to shift your whole mindset. You're not just preparing for a test, you are rehearsing for your next job. The real question isn't just, can I pass? It's, am I ready to step into this role for real?
What people often do is obsess excessively about reading around that pre-scene and delving deeply into the industry that that pre-scene is set within. You have to remember the purpose of the pre-scene is to give you the information you need to set the scene. It's to try and give everyone the same starting point when it comes to going into the exam room. So although it's important to get to know the pre-scene and to think about what the pre-scene can be leaning towards in terms of issues and areas to focus on, you have to remember that actually the main focus of the actual questions given to you on the day stems from some new information that's given to you on that day. The pre-scene is just there as background. Now, the exam itself has got 4 45-minute sections within it, and it's equally weighted for each section. Each section has got several subtasks within it. So you'll be given some new information on the day for that section. And then within that new information, there'll be several subtasks for you to do. You'll notice they're called tasks, not questions. The idea being it's trying to be that work-based simulation. Any one subtask doesn't have to be limited to just one part of the operational syllabus. It can be from several syllabus areas potentially. Now, this next one is an important point to note. You can think of this exam as being 4 mini exams, because if you finish one of those 45-minute sections early, you can move on to the next 45-minute section, but importantly, you cannot bank time. So if you finish a section 5 minutes early, you'll be finishing the whole exam 5 minutes early. You are wasting that time. So if you do happen to finish a section a few minutes early, don't move on. Use that time to polish up what's on the screen in front of you, and keep polishing until the time runs out. In keeping with this being a work-based type scenario, you will be asked to reply in a variety of formats. It could be email, memo, report, briefing note. So you need to be aware of, first of all, the layout for those kinds of things, but importantly, the tone of them as well, and how formal. And for example, if you're doing a report, you'll need an introduction, you'll need a conclusion and sign off, and you'll need to structure it carefully so that it flows nicely as a report. A memo is probably a bit less formal than a report and is for internal consumption only. So you need to be mindful of that, as well as mindful of who you're writing to. You are provided with a word processor in the test software, and that test software is available for you to practice on the CIMA website. And I would recommend that when you're practicing questions in preparation for this exam, you use the real software as much as possible. It takes some getting used to, that software, so what you don't want to be doing is working out how to use it, particularly on the day. Now, in the case study, you will be given some numbers in the pre-seen and quite often in the new information, the unseen as it's called, given to you on the day. But you won't be expected to perform lots of detailed calculations. The calculations side of thing has already been tested in the OT papers. It's all about interpretation. So what's more likely is that you are given some numbers that you need to talk about, or talk about the consequences of what those numbers are telling you, and so on. So I'm not saying don't go in without a calculator. It never hurts to have a calculator close by, but don't expect to be doing lots and lots of numbers. There are some tables provided for you to use, present value, cumulative present value tables, and the normal distribution, but they are rarely needed, to be honest, following on from the previous point that there aren't much detailed calculations to worry about.
Limiting factor analysis and shadow prices. So here is where you will also have a linear program related questions. So sometimes certain ingredients might not be available, and we need to identify what the limiting factor is, what's the contribution per limiting factor, rank the dishes that use it, and then decide which dish do we prioritize, which dish should we forego. For an example, we might have a few fish related dishes, and now we have only limited fish, and we want to prioritize which dish should we use the fish for. So we have a limiting factor analysis that comes into play, and shadow pricing. And if it's more than 2 constraints, we will use, for an example, the graphical method, which is linear programming. Actually, in fact, if we have 2 simultaneous constraints rather, we will use the graphical linear programming method, where you will have a ISO contribution line drawn, and the end of it will be the furthest feasible corner, which will give us the optimal production plan. So we will have questions on this in a mock or a task for you to practice linear programming. But in the meantime, I would encourage you to go through linear programming to an extent, to give you an idea of what, if linear programming is something even if you did your OTQ, you might have forgotten linear programming, but it's definitely something that will be useful. So in terms of linear programming, what I specifically want you to remember is understanding the steps of it. Identify the step of, first of all, you need to define the variables. So defining the variables means that you have to come up with for an example, the number of fish or the number of units of this dish prepared, we can define it as X. The number of this dish prepared as Y. So you define the variables, then you come up with an objective function. So what is the objective? Generally, the objective is either to minimize the cost or to maximize the contribution or the profit, isn't it? Then you state the constraints. So constraints are also stated in terms of equations. You state the constraints. For an example, you have fish and it's used in this quantities for both dishes and the maximum fish available along with the other constraint. So you state the constraints, then you talk about drawing the graph. So that maybe the graph might be given or you simply have to explain drawing the graph, and then you would talk about how you would find the optimum solution or the most applicable solution. So you would talk about either using the equation method to solve it, the simultaneous equation method, or using the ISO contribution line and looking at the feasible region as the furthest region. So basically that's how you would attempt linear programming constraint related question. So back to the note. So remember, this was considered something that most candidates found very hard. So that is why I wanted to give you the steps. Understanding these steps, so you will have in your study notes, if you go back, you refer, understand these steps. You're not expected to do a calculation. You're not expected to draw the linear graph, but you need to explain it. Next, time series analysis. So with time series analysis, it's important you understand what the trend is. So the trend can be gotten in different ways. Understand the seasonal aspect and identify the random factors. Random factors don't tend to come so much. Mainly your time series, your value for maybe the quantity will be T plus S. So your trend plus your seasonality aspects. Most likely we do have seasonality. More tourist months will mean more demand. Summer months might be more demand. So understanding this. So understand how we will forecast. So the steps are given here. So we might use a regression. You might be given the regression equation. Or you might have to, that's the most common ways you're tested on this. You might be given the regression equation, or you will have a, I would say, a more like a diagram given. So using this diagram, you should be able to spot what the overall trend is and what the seasonality is. So you will notice that generally the graph will be given for a particular period of time, maybe 4 years, 5 years. And then you will be able to see during certain months, certain quarters, there's a dip and a persistent dip in these quarters. So every year the first quarter is a dip, for an instance. Every year the second quarter is a peak, a higher amount. So then you can identify what the seasonality is. So this is apart from the overall rising or decreasing or constant trend. Then we have IFRS 16, again very applicable because I believe at least some of our restaurants might be under leases. They might be under IFRS 16 leases. As we open new restaurants, again, highly applicable. And additionally, it is a heavily tested area in your operational case study. So therefore, you need to know, first of all, the definition of IFRS 16. How do you recognize something as a part of IFRS 16? So you need to first recognize a right of use asset. And then you need to recognize the liability portion, which will be a lease liability. Then you need to recognize how do you initially measure the lease liability and how do you initially measure the right of use asset. So the lease liability is initially measured at the present value, very important, of the unpaid lease payments. The unpaid lease payments, not the total lease payments. Because for an example, if you're paid upfront, that is not part of your lease liability. Whereas your right of use asset, you will measure it as cost. So here this coincides with IAS 16. how do you measure cost for the asset? So here this will even include payments made initially, initial cost, all of that. Subsequent measurement of lease liability, how do you measure it? Of use asset, again, it follows IAS 16. What are the disclosures required? You need to mention what is the depreciation for the right of use asset. You need to mention the carrying amounts, the lease liability amounts, all of that. So some important information given here when talking about how you would record the asset under IFRS 16. So remember, you need to talk about your initial measurement and your subsequent measurement both for the right of use asset as well as the lease liability. Next, IAS 2 inventories. So again, given that we do have a lot of ingredients, both fresh and other supplies, inventories become a key aspect. So you need to know what is considered as inventory. What is the measurement rule? So you measure it at the lower of cost and NRV, the lower of the two. And if there is a difference, you have to write it down in your profit and loss as a loss if the cost is less than the NRV. So what does the cost include? According to IAS 2, it includes purchase price, non-refundable import duties and other taxes, transport, handling and other costs. What is NRV is also given here. Not commonly tested, but IAS 2 permits two cost formulas which you should be aware of. First in, first out and average cost. Last in, first out is prohibited. If you look at the type of business we are in, definitely first in, first out seems way more applicable given that we're talking about fresh ingredients. So here, what are the reasons you might have to write down inventory to the NRV? Damage, spoiled ingredients, abnormal wastage. All of this might mean we might have to write down our inventory, fresh ingredients as well as other inventory. What are the disclosures? Under IAS 2, you need to disclose the accounting policy you use for measuring your inventories, whether it was first in, first out or average cost, including the cost formula used. You need to talk about the carrying amount of each inventory item. So inventories can be divided into raw materials, like our raw material ingredients, work in progress, and finished good. That means our finished dishes. Also, if they are not sold immediately, they will be a part of inventory. But however, most likely, most of our inventory consists of raw materials, given that we are a very fast-moving business type, or that's our industry. Now, if you think of a manufacturing industry, they will have materials under raw materials, work in progress, and finished goods. Unlikely, we will be the same. Next, we have the CIMA Code of Ethics. Now, this is very important for you because CIMA is very concerned that you're not just a management accountant, but you are an ethical management accountant, an ethical finance professional. So to be this, your examiner likes to give you subtasks, exam scenarios, which require you to apply the CIMA Code of Ethics, fundamental ethical principles, either directly or indirectly. So directly would be a direct subtask on ethics. Indirectly would be maybe a task or another task where a student might perceive an ethical dilemma and just bring it out. But nevertheless, you need to know the CIMA Code of Ethics. So there are 5 fundamental CIMA ethical principles: integrity, objectivity, professional competence and due care, confidentiality, and professional behavior. So each of them mean different things. Integrity means we need to be honest in all our professional dealing. We need to be straightforward. We don't lie. We don't give misleading or reckless information. Objectivity is we do not let biasness affect us. We don't allow conflict of interest affect us. We don't get unduly influenced so that our business judgment is compromised. Professional competence and due care is about maintaining our professional knowledge and skill. For an example, if you are a management account professional, you need to keep updating yourselves and act diligently in line with the applicable standard. Confidentiality, you do not disclose confidential professional work, information, unless you are required legally or you have a professional duty to do it. So there is a balance there. Professional behavior is you comply with relevant laws and regulations. You avoid anything that brings discredit to the profession. So based on this, you might get different scenarios. And based on the scenario, different principles might be violated. For an example, potentially 1 or 2 principles can be violated. So you need to always, when it comes to a subtask relating to the CIMA Code of Ethics, first of all, it's important, I think we mentioned this even in the pre-scene analysis, refer to the CIMA Code of Ethics. So state that you are referring to the CIMA Code of Ethics. Then mention the five fundamental ethical principles. So these are the 5 we discussed now. Then dive deeper into the potentially violated principles. Dive deeper into the potentially violated principles. So for an example, you notice that objectivity and professional competence and due care is violated. Then you dive deeper. You explain what it means, why you're saying this principle is violated. So you dive deeper, you argue. Remember, you don't always have to finally say there is a violation. You might say based on this, there is no violation as well. So you argue whether there is a violation or not. And finally, explain your action at the end of the day. So if there is a violation based on what you argued, you need to take action, escalate it, talk to the relevant parties to avoid the violation. If there is no violation, you can, of course, move on. You don't have to do anything. Nothing. Basically, you don't have to do anything. But if there is a violation, it's absolutely vital. Action is taken, both internally, and if internally nothing can be done, even externally. The important thing is you cannot remain silent. You have to take action.
So that's your SOPA pre-scene, unpacked. Now you know the company, you know the triggers, and you know what to expect. But knowing the triggers is just the start. The real work is being able to answer exam tasks under time conditions, in the right format, with the right depth that the examiner is actually looking for. That's exactly what our full OCS course at Practices Academy is built to do. We have 4 packages depending on where you are in your preparation, from the complete course with SOPA pre-scene specific tasks, up to the way to full mock exams with written tutor feedback and priority marking. Everything is available right now. No waiting, no drip content, you buy, you access, you start. The link is in the description. And if you found this video useful, please give it a thumbs up. It really helps more OCS students find this content. And if you want free OCS resources throughout the sitting, make sure to subscribe. Good luck, you got this!